My name is Mike Harp. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York now. I originally grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, in the heartland, and suburbia. And I suppose it was a great place to grow up, but I couldn't wait to escape.
My name is Billy Jared Frank. I'm a multimedia artist and filmmaker. I was born in Petit Martinique, which is the sister isle of Grenada, from a family of 10. There were mainly boat builders and fishermen and farmers.
I'm the only child from my mother and my father. They divorced when I was 2 years old, and then my dad remarried, and I have a half brother and a half sister who are each 4 years apart, younger than me. And then I have a step brother and a step sister that are older than me.
I left home when I was a teenager and moved to the UK to study and then fine art and to pursue a career in film and media. Then I moved to New York, and I've been living in New York, specifically in Brooklyn, working as an artist and a filmmaker.
I work at Facebook. I lead global brand partnerships, and I help big global brands learn how to tell stories on mobile devices and to bring those stories to life in the most relevant ways. I'm a photographer and journalist by training, and I'm really passionate about storytelling and creating experiences around those stories. I'm married. I have 2 young children, a 7-year-old girl named Jojo and a 10-year-old boy named Kenny.
Presently, I define myself as a queer man of color, specifically a queer man of color with origins from the Caribbean, because the Caribbean also plays a very important part of who I am and defines who I am, and the fact that I've returned to the Caribbean recently and really been exploring my cultural connection to the Caribbean.
It's interesting. It's interesting, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what it means to be a man, but I know I benefit every day from being one. I'm often not proud of what it looks like to be a man, or at least this antiquated standard of manhood that has been pushed upon us by the previous generations. I'm often embarrassed or ashamed that bad behavior, men behaving badly is a standard, a societal standard. I mean, it's shocking. And the moments where I'm proud to be a man is where I see people around me standing up and changing that.
It's gendered, but also beyond gendered, because once you begin to look at one's life from a creative and spiritual place, I think it's much broader, and it encompasses not just me, but also other people that have, paved the way for me to be a queer artist. So I think it's much more larger than sexuality for me. It's more of an artistic and spiritual expression of one's identity.
Although I'm a man, I am a feminist. I believe in equal rights. The labels that I grew up with, they don't seem enough anymore. They don't seem complete. So I actually struggle with that, because as I grow older, I keep learning and gaining new experiences and additional labels that define who I am in aggregate. And hopefully that never changes, because that's what keeps things exciting. My dad is very old school, has an old school view of what masculinity and being a man means. And that was passed on from his father and his father before him, where real men don't cry and you bury your emotions. He taught me that lesson about being a fighter and using anger and violence to express myself from a very early age. I remember him as probably 5 or 6 years old, pacing in front of me in the living room, giving me a lecture. Boy, real men don't cry. You got a problem with somebody? They say something you don't like, do something you don't like, you hit them in the face. Hit them hard. Don't give them any baby love tap. I was fortunate that when I was 12 years old, I moved in with my mother, and throughout my life since that point, I've had very strong women that have showed me other ways of expressing myself, and rather than being afraid of emotion and showing my vulnerability, I've learned that that's actually a source of strength and power. And the definition of being a man has evolved quite a bit now that I'm an adult. Thank God, because can you imagine a world where people, the way they solve their problems is with their fists?
I think that was basically my whole life growing up in the Caribbean, where I felt limited in the sense that I was not accepted, and I knew from a very early age that there was no space there for me in the Caribbean as a gay man, as a sensitive gay man who was exploring sexuality and also a creative field. I just came back from Grenada. I shot my film there that's in the Venice Biennale. I'm representing Grenada this year, and had the opportunity to go back and work with a lot of young queer people on the island who are a lot more progressive and a lot more open than when I was living there in the 1970s and the 1980s. So I do think that the Caribbean in general is changing the perspective and the whole beliefs and views towards gay people and homosexuality, even though Grenada still has laws that goes back to the British laws that says that homosexuality is still like, a crime. My relationship to masculinity is constantly evolving and changing, I think. I feel there's a two soul inside of me lately. My creative side I feel is very much connected to the feminine, and my masculine definitely side is more like how I operate in the world in terms of my business transactions and reality and just surviving. But it's always for me a constant battle of finding that balance, and sometimes I'm not always sure I understand what is feminine versus what is masculine, or the yin and the yang, as Young would have termed it. But I feel that definitely for me there's two specific sides, and they're feminine and the masculine. And maybe the feminine sometimes could, for me, is sort of a spiritual side of myself. I feel the part of me that has always craved spirituality and crave and yearn to have a deeper relationship with something higher. Interestingly enough, even people think that sometimes because you're gay that, most gay people have a feminine side, but that is not necessarily true.
Now that I'm an adult, my definition of what it means to be a man has evolved considerably. Beyond just being a man, I think it's about being a good human being. I was born a man, so I can't really control that, but I can control how I show up as a person every day. And for me, that means being a great partner for my wife. I really strive to be a 50-50 partner with her, in terms of our household and taking care of and raising our children. For my son, that means teaching him these antiquated ideas about real men don't cry. Throw that out the window. It's ridiculous that real men actually show their feelings and have multiple ways of dealing with their problems, starting with their words and listening and trying to make connections with people versus their fists and dividing people.
I think in terms of my masculine side and my father, when I think of my father, I feel a lot of sadness for him, because even though he was a creative artist, a boat builder and a fisherman and built houses, I don't think he was actually very connected or conscious of the creative side, his feminine side. And if ever he was, he would have felt a lot of shame around it, or maybe didn't have any voice for it, because in the culture in which he grew up, it was not okay for a man to be feminine or to be even sensitive. In the Caribbean, there's a lot of negative, derogatory statements that people make and still continue to make. Even when I was there shooting my film, I heard people making the statements, of calling, gay people batty boys, tanty man, CC, faggot, and all these derogatory terms. Those were labels that I heard that was defining me, who I was as a person, and it made me felt shame and belittled. and I always felt that this was not a positive thing. And it wasn't until I left home and went to the UK and began to see positive examples and explore it, did I really come to understand that it was okay for me to be a gay person and a queer person. My family didn't quite know what to do with me, or didn't have words to, they didn't have the vocabulary or the experience to really understand what it meant to have a gay child, because they were not exposed to any kind of positive role models of homosexuality in the Caribbean. So that alone was a sort of a limitation, not having family who understand you, or place that you can go to talk about what you're feeling and what you're experiencing growing up, particularly in schools where I felt bullied. Growing up also going to a Catholic school, that I felt there was a lot of limitation there. So there's basically many examples, but I think the closer one is just not being able to have a space to communicate what one was feeling, and the vulnerability of teenage years.
It's interesting. I now that I'm a father and I see my children at the age where I have a lot of vivid memories of the way that my dad treated me, it's really transformed my view, where I think from the majority of my life I've really been a fighter and buried my emotion. I put my armor on, and it's been key to my success and what I've been able to achieve at this point in my life. But I've also come to realize that it's gotten me as far as it'll go. If I really want to show up as a good human being, I need to take my armor off and be okay with showing vulnerability, and not seeing vulnerability as a weakness, but really as strength, and showing my humanity. If you and I each have our armor on, there's only a surface level of connection that can happen. But if I'm brave and I take my armor off and I confide things in you and I show my feelings, then you're more likely, it's an invitation for you to do the same thing, and we can have much deeper connections as human beings that wouldn't be possible otherwise. For my daughter, it means helping to instill self-esteem and to help her to believe that she can do anything that a boy or a man can do, and to have big dreams, and to work hard to achieve those dreams, and making sure that she's creating expectations that men or women or boys or girls are respecting her, because she deserves that regardless of her gender, and having confidence to set those expectations in her daily life. I think if she learns that now, and that's a big role for me as a father, is to help with my wife establish that, so then she can grow up as a strong, confident person, despite a lot of the bias and prejudice that she's going to face as a woman in the future.
Actually, when I think of my mother, I think my mother is very much connected to her masculine side, because she was more like, even though my dad was the breadwinner, my mother was the one who was home taking care of the children, and raising 10 kids and 7 boys was not easy. So I felt that she was a very strong, domineering figure in my life, and actually even with my own father, she was the person who took charge and took control of the house and paid the bills and managed the children, and she was definitely more connected to her masculine side, I think.
One of those stories that I've just started to feel more comfortable sharing, but it's still difficult, is being abused as a child. My dad grew up in a violent household, and violence, those are the lessons that he taught me growing up, that not only do real men not cry, real men use their fists when they're unhappy, right? And my dad really never learned to use any other emotions. And I remember being a kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, and when my dad was angry, him punching me or kicking me, and I think the worst part was the emotional abuse and telling me that I'm no good, that I don't matter, my ideas don't matter. And it's hard not to internalize that.
It's okay, it's gonna be all right. We've arrived, it's fine, we'll be taken care of. I think the young boy that I remember was very scared of life and facing life, even though he was a very strong and courageous. But there's a lot of fear and uncertainty and a sense of aloneness in the world and a sense of exile, having been estranged from family for a long time, living home at a young age, the uncertainty of moving to big cities without a family, and the fear of being homeless and the fear of surviving. There was a lot of uncertainty and self-doubts that I had as a young boy, and I think I still have to constantly, tell that young boy it's okay, that we're gonna be safe.
What happened to you wasn't your fault. You didn't deserve that. No matter what you did as a child, you didn't deserve that. That wasn't your problem. That was someone else's problem. And you're bigger than that, and you don't have to be ashamed anymore. Take the gift of wisdom that came from that and everything you learned, but let it go too. This was not, you didn't deserve it. It happened to you. You've become a better person because of it. And it's okay to move on now, but don't be ashamed.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Being a feminist, at its essence, is equality for everyone. For men, women, transgender, people that are fluid, that don't fit, the antiquated labels. It's really equal rights for everyone, and the world would be a better place with that. There's a mountain of research to show the value of diversity, of representation and perspective.
I think we're living in a very interesting times in terms of how people experience and express gender equality, and I think it's mainly very positive, and it's awesome to see the public as well is slowly coming to accept the other and becoming comfortable with terms like they and we, and using these terms and encouraging people in the marketplace and the jobs to actually use those terms as well to refer to people from different genders.
The ways that I'm focusing on being an ally, first, just being conscious of bias right from the very beginning. As a white male, I'm very aware that race or gender, those are things that I only have to think about when I want to. Whereas that's not true for everyone. So first, just being aware that bias exists and being conscious of ways that I can be an ally day in, day out. And whether that's helping with representation or making sure that everyone has a voice in my community or in business situations, those are simple things that I can do and that all of us can do. It's a way of acknowledging our privilege and asserting that to help bring more diversity of perspectives.
I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of acceptance, general acceptance of other people and people's gender and equality. The work is never finished. There's a lot that we still have to do on a daily basis to make people more comfortable and to eliminate discrimination and equal opportunity for not just people of different sexuality, but also just in people in general from different cultures. There's need to be a sense of more openness and a sense of more a space to hold other people and to see that we're all connected and we're all part of a larger community on a larger level.
Being a white male, I can choose when I want to think about race or gender. And not everyone has that same privilege. And that really became increasingly clear to me during the Me Too movement. And I was really deeply affected to learn all these women in my life that are really important to me that had experienced either abuse or harassment or both, and many of whom I had no idea that was happening to them. And that's hard. I mean, it's disturbing that that happens to anyone, but at the scale in which this is happening, where it's institutional victimization on an ongoing basis, things need to change. Nobody should have to go through that, and this antiquated male standard of what power looks like, it doesn't fit in the world we live in today. And people suffer, businesses suffer, and I think as leaders, there's a real opportunity to set a new standard for leadership and what that looks like. And I only want to work with companies that make that a priority.
Family is continued to be the center, the locus of my creative exploration, and it helps me to, it's also kind of psychotherapy for me, because it helps me to really explore my own personal relationship with myself and whatever blocks I might have towards expressing love and creativity. I made a film a couple of years ago called Absence of Love, and that was kind of the beginning, if you will, of an exploration around my dad. And at the time it was the first time I went back to Grenada after not seeing him for 18 years. And we took him into a nursing home at the time, and he had no memory of who I was, and that was a very tragic thing for me. And the film explored a relationship between two lovers here in New York that was falling apart, and the death of a father the son had to go back to visit his father that he was estranged from. And the film I'm doing now for the Venice Biennale is called Second Eulogy, Mind the Gap. And it also explored an archive, a suitcase that I found after my father's death, containing letters, marks, mementos of his life that is going to be part of the Biennale show. The letters were actually letters that was written to my father that he never really answered, and these letters were written a long time ago, maybe in the 90s, and some of them were written maybe in the early 2000s. And at the time when I wrote the letters, he had his full senses. He wasn't, when I saw him last, he had Alzheimer's. And at that particular moment in my life, I was very vulnerable, and I was still looking for my father's love. And that also played out on a very active level in my own relationships with men. That I was still looking for daddy's love. And there was a kind of vulnerability and sadness in the character of the person that I still am, but I've grown and evolved from that person. I was able to hold that person in a lot of love and compassion who wrote those letters, and to see the transformation that has happened since because of the work I've done on myself.
I just came back from Kenya, where I joined Emmanuel Jal, who's a former child soldier and now activist, on a trip to Kakuma refugee camp. And it was such a life-changing experience. I first, to see people that all they've lived through extreme conditions, war, famine, being separated from their families, despite all of that, they still have big dreams. They're creative, resourceful, talented people that just need someone to believe in them, and a helping hand like we've all had in our lives, and that could transform their lives. And I was really struck during that trip, as I try to put myself out there and be confident or courageous in telling more of my story and things that had happened to me in the past, like being abused by my father. I was struck by even sharing my story with people that are in refugee camps that have experienced war, talking about that with them, rather than them judging me. It actually made us feel closer as human beings, and it allowed for a connection that wasn't possible otherwise. And I made so many friends, and I'm so inspired by their journeys, and the more that I shared, the more they were comfortable and had trust in me to share also. And so if anything, it's helped build confidence to put myself out there more, but also think about actions I can take to be a part of the solution, to be a part of change. Often it's small gestures that can have massive impact, and I'm really excited to first get more of these incredible people's stories out there beyond what you see in traditional media. The dreams and concrete ways that people can help be a part of the solution. There's really small steps to fund someone's education, or to share your time,
I do feel that I've become my whole self, maybe in the last 5-6 years more so than before. And it's still an evolving self, because we never stop learning and we never stop growing. Why should we ever stop? So I think that the person who I am right now, on many levels, I'm very proud of what I've achieved and where I'm going, what I've been able to experience. And I really am open to growing and expanding and always learning, especially creatively and spiritually, to challenge myself.
I don't feel my whole self. I'm 44 years old, and I'm just now trying to learn how to embrace my full self and discover what that even means, what that is. But the more that I share and open up about how I'm feeling, and really listening to how other people are feeling, and seeing those openings as an opportunity versus something to be afraid of or threatened by, it helps me discover more who I am and have experiences that I couldn't have had otherwise. So I'm excited to be on this journey. I wish I could have started it earlier, but hey, better late than never, right?
Lam nyambur